The first and the foremost step to get the replica set up and running is to set up some folders. My idea is to get the replica set working on the same machine. That's why I've created all the folders on the same machine. I've got a folder for the primary instance, two folders for the secondary instances, and then a folder for the arbiter. If you intend to run the replica set on different servers, then I would recommend you to create all these folders on their respective servers. If we look into each of these folder, there are two subfolders, a data folder and a log folder. In the data folder, all of your data will be saved, whereas in the log folder, your logs will be saved. These are your database logs where the database activities will be logged. So I've got these two subfolders in inside each of the main folder. Once the folder structure is created, the next step will be to create the configuration files for each of the instances. So I've got a .cfg file for the primary instance, two .cfg files for the secondary instances, and a .cfg file for the arbiter. And if you look at these CFG files closely, all of these have the same settings. So I'll go through quickly the settings for the primary file, for the primary instance. If you are able to understand these settings, then you can easily create .cfg files for the secondary instances and also the arbiter. In any case, I will share these configuration files on my Git repository, and you can see the link in the descriptions below so that you can inspect the configuration files yourself and make changes appropriately. Now, the first important setting is the path, and the system log path corresponds to the log folder which we've just created for the primary instance. And we've also given the log file name, which we would want to be created in case of any database activities. In the storage DB path, we will point to the data folder which we've created for the primary database instance. In the port setting, we will specify the port where we would want the primary instance to be running. Bind IP is a setting which is optional in this case because the default value of the bind IP is 127.0.0.1. Because all of our instances and the arbiter are running on the same machine, therefore 127.0.0.1 is a perfectly correct value, and that's the default value for bind IP. So we can ignore this setting. The reason why I've specified over here is for scenarios where you would intend to build each of the instance on separate servers. And in those scenarios, you would want to have the setting in your configuration file. And you would specify the value of bind IP to be 0.0.0. And this would enable your instance to be able to bound to all the IPs, and the configurations, the instances, the database instances would be able to communicate with each other without any issues. If you don't have the bind IP set up in your configuration files, then of course your instances won't be able to bind to any other IP except the local IP, and you would find issues while setting up your instances, especially the replica set. You would also need to specify the replica set name, which should be common along all these configuration files. Security settings would enable you to set up authorization and authentication. We are not going to look into the security settings right now. I've just placed it so that we know that we can set up the security, and we will look into this in detail in the future. For now, the authorization is disabled, and there's a key file setting which is also going to be an important one in the future. For now, I've commented it using the hash sign. For the secondary 1 server, again, the same settings. We are pointing to a log file path, which we've just created. The file we have not created, but we definitely created the folder structure. The file will be created as soon as your secondary database is up and running. You would also point in your configurations to the data folder for the secondary server, the port where you intend the secondary server to be running. You may also like to set up the bind IP configuration setting. The replica set name again is demo, and the security settings would be disabled for now. The secondary 2 server has pretty much the same configuration setting. You would be able to easily create these. Again, I've shared all these configuration files in my GitHub repository, so you can inspect them yourself and change that according to your needs. And the arbiter setting is exactly the same. You just need to make sure that the log file path and data file path are correct, i.e. pointing to the log folder for the MongoDB arbiter and the data folder for the MongoDB arbiter. You would also need to adjust the port where you would want the arbiter to be running. So that's about it. In the next video, we would examine the batch file, which we'll be creating in order to create the services for primary and secondary servers, and also the arbiter. And we will be seeing that those services will be making use of these configuration files. But that's for the next video.